funny thing about betrayal is how ordinary the moment feels when you first discover it. I was debugging a thermal regulation algorithm when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just another Tuesday afternoon in my cluttered home office, surrounded by circuit boards and empty coffee cups, the kind of mundane moment that later becomes a dividing line between your old life and everything that comes after. Hey Vincent, Elena and I really enjoyed meeting Isabella last week. She mentioned you're both new to this lifestyle. How about dinner Friday at the Barcelona wine bar to discuss boundaries and expectations? The four of us should definitely establish ground rules before moving forward. I stared at the message, my brain trying to process what I was reading. Isabella and I hadn't been to the Barcelona wine bar in months. We definitely hadn't met anyone named Elena. And what did this lifestyle even mean? I typed back quickly, "Who is this? I think you have the wrong number." The response came within minutes. "This is Derek Sterling. Your wife Isabella? From the gym? She said you two discussed opening things up." My stomach dropped. Derek Sterling. Isabella had mentioned that name recently. Something about Elena's husband who owned some tech company. But opening things up? We'd never had that conversation, not even close. Before I could respond, another message arrived. This one contained a photo. I set my phone down without looking at it, my hands suddenly shaking. I knew, with the kind of bone-deep certainty that comes before conscious thought, that whatever was in that photo would change everything. For 30 seconds, I sat there in my office chair, listening to the hum of my computer fans and the distant sound of traffic on Queens Road, trying to hold on to the last few moments of my marriage being something I recognized. Then I picked up the phone and looked. Isabella was in a hot tub, laughing. Her arms were around a man I didn't recognize, Derek, presumably, while a brunette woman pressed close to her other side. The intimacy was unmistakable. Isabella's expression was one I hadn't seen in years. Pure, uninhibited joy. She looked more alive in that photo than she had in our own house for months. My phone buzzed again. "Wait. Isabella said you knew about Thursday. She said you were too shy to join but gave permission. Please call me." Thursday. 3 nights ago. Isabella had come home around 11, claiming she'd had to wine and dine a difficult client. She'd showered immediately, something about chlorine from a hotel pool where the client meeting had supposedly taken place. I'd been half asleep, barely registering her explanation. I called the number immediately. Derek speaking. The voice was cautious, concerned. "This is Vincent Fitzgerald, Isabella's husband. We need to talk." There was a long pause. "Jesus, she really didn't tell you, did she?" "Tell me what exactly?" "Look, man, I'm putting you on speaker. Elena's here too. We need to figure out what the hell is going on." A woman's voice joined the conversation. "Vincent? Elena here. I'm so sorry. We would never, ever have gotten involved if we'd known Isabella was lying about having your consent." "Lying about what consent?" Derek's voice was tight with anger. Not at me, I realized, but at my wife. "She told us you two had an arrangement, that you were exploring opening up your marriage but you were shy about jumping in. She said you'd given her permission to test the waters first." I was quiet for a moment, processing. "How long has this been going on?" 2 weeks, Elena said quickly. "The first time was just drinks after CrossFit, getting to know each other. But then last week she came over for dinner and..." She trailed off. "And what?" "Things progressed," Derek said carefully. "But the whole time she kept talking about how you were okay with this, how you were too analytical to be spontaneous, but you wanted her to explore. She made it sound like you'd orchestrated the whole thing." "Show me everything," I said. "Every text, every conversation. I need to see exactly what she told you." "We'll send screenshots now," Elena said. "Vincent, I'm sick about this. We've been in the lifestyle for 5 years. Consent is everything. The fact that she used us like this..." My phone started buzzing with incoming messages. Screenshots of text conversations between Isabella and Derek. Screenshots of Isabella and Elena. Each one made my chest tighter. Isabella to Derek, 2 weeks ago. "Vincent and I are finally ready to explore. He's nervous but excited." Isabella to Elena, 10 days ago. "V gave me the green light to start without him. He wants me to vet potential partners first." Isabella to Derek, the day of the hot tub photo. Don't mention anything to Vincent yet. He wants me to test the waters before he decides if he's ready to participate. I scrolled through dozens of messages, each one a small knife twist. Not just the lies, but the calculated nature of them. She'd crafted an entire narrative, positioning me as a willing participant in my own humiliation. There's more, Derek said grimly. She's been shopping around at the gym. Elena knows at least 2 other couples she approached with similar stories. She what? Elena's voice was disgusted. She's been telling people you two are looking to spice things up and asking who might be interested. Vincent, she's been using your name to troll for sexual partners for months. I ended the call and sat in my office, staring at the evidence scattered across my phone screen. 8 years of marriage, reduced to lies and manipulation. The woman I'd built a life with had been systematically shopping me around like a commodity, using my supposed consent to justify her betrayal. I made 2 more calls. First to my attorney Michael Harrison, leaving a voicemail asking him to call me back urgently. Then to Derek. I need one more favor, I said when he answered. Can you record a call between you and Isabella? Get her to confirm the lies? Already thought of that, Derek said. Elena's calling her now. 20 minutes later, they sent me the audio file. Isabella's voice, bright and confident, explaining to Elena how she was slowly introducing Vincent to the idea, and how she was sure he'd come around once he saw how much fun it was. I know he seems vanilla, Isabella said in the recording, but he just needs the right motivation. Once he sees me with other people and realizes how much happier I am, he'll want to join in. I listened to the entire 15-minute conversation twice. My wife, the woman who still kissed me goodbye every morning and asked about my day every evening, was systematically planning to manipulate me into accepting her affair by presenting me with a fait accompli. I saved everything to a secure cloud drive, made copies on 2 different hard drives, and printed the most damning screenshots. By the time Isabella's key turned in the front door at 6:47 p.m., I was sitting at our kitchen island with a manila folder full of evidence and a voice recorder app open on my phone. Hey babe, she called out, dropping her gym bag by the front door. She looked flushed and energetic, practically glowing. Now I knew why. How was your day? Interesting, I said. Come sit down, we need to talk. She froze in the doorway to the kitchen, her expression shifting from casual warmth to wariness in an instant. What's wrong? I slid my phone across the granite countertop, showing Derek's initial text message. Can you explain this? Isabella stared at the screen for a long moment. I watched her face cycle through emotions, confusion, recognition, fear, and finally a desperate kind of calculation. Vincent, I can explain. Please do. She sat down across from me, her hands shaking slightly. Okay, so I met Derek and Elena at the gym. They're really nice people, very open-minded, and we got to talking about relationships and they mentioned that they have an open marriage. Go on? I was curious. Just curious. So I asked them some questions about how it works, and they invited me over for dinner to talk about it more. I opened the folder and spread the printed screenshots across the counter between us. These are your text messages with them, Isabella. You told them we'd already discussed opening our marriage. You told them I'd given you permission. Her face went white. Those are private conversations. Private conversations where you lied about me, where you used my name to justify sleeping with other people. I wasn't sleeping with anyone. The protest came out too quickly, too sharp. I picked up one of the photos Derek had sent, the one from the hot tub, and placed it in front of her. This was Thursday night, wasn't it? When you told me you were having dinner with that client from Asheville? Isabella stared at the photo like it might disappear if she looked hard enough. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. How did you get this? Derek sent it to me, along with all your text messages, along with a recording of you explaining how you were going to manipulate me into accepting this. I hit play on the audio file. Her own voice filled our kitchen, bright and confident. I know he seems vanilla, but he just needs the right motivation. Once he sees me with other people and realizes how much happier I am, he'll want to join in. Isabella's face crumpled. Vincent, please let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to me for weeks? How you've been using my name to proposition people at your gym? How you plan to manipulate me into accepting your affair by presenting it as something I'd agreed to? It's not an affair, she said desperately. We're married. Married people can explore together. Together, I repeated. But I wasn't there, was I? I didn't even know about it. I was going to tell you. I was going to ease you into the idea slowly. I thought if I could show you how much fun it was, how much happier it made me, you'd want to try it too. By lying to everyone involved? By telling Derek and Elena that I'd already consented? I panicked. They kept asking to meet you, and I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I closed the folder and looked at my wife of 8 years. Really looked at her. The woman I'd met at an industry mixer in 2016 who'd impressed me with her knowledge of cardiac pharmaceuticals and her passion for improving patient outcomes. The woman who'd cried when we bought our house, overwhelmed by the idea that we were building something permanent together. The woman who'd held my hand through my father's funeral and celebrated with me when I'd gotten the defense contract. How many times? I asked quietly. What? How many times did you sleep with them? Isabella's eyes darted away from mine. It only happened a couple of times. How many? 3, she whispered. 3 times over 2 weeks. I nodded and stood up. Pack a bag, call your sister Grace. You're staying there tonight. Vincent, no, please, we can work through this. It was a mistake. A stupid, impulsive mistake. This wasn't impulsive, Isabella. This was calculated. You lied to me, you lied to them, you committed fraud with your expense reports to pay for your dates, and you planned to manipulate me into accepting it after the fact. She looked startled. How do you know about my expense reports? Because Derek told me about the expensive dinners you claimed were client meetings. It's all documented, Isabella. Every lie, every deception, every manipulation. I headed toward the stairs. Pack your things. Grace is expecting you. You already called Grace? I called her an hour ago. She's not happy with you. Isabella followed me upstairs, tears streaming down her face. Vincent, please. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. People survive affairs all the time. I turned to face her on the landing. This wasn't an affair, Isabella. Affairs are about emotion, about falling for someone else. This was prostitution. You sold our marriage for excitement. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. It's not fair that you destroyed 8 years for 2 weeks of fun. It's not fair that you made me an unwilling participant in your sexual adventures. It's not fair that you're more upset about getting caught than you are about betraying me. She packed in silence while I watched, making sure she didn't take anything that belonged to both of us. The wedding photos on her nightstand stayed. The jewelry I'd bought her could go, but the family heirlooms remained. When she was done, she had 2 suitcases and her laptop bag. At the front door, she turned to me one last time. I love you, Vincent. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. If you loved me, I said, opening the door for her, you wouldn't have used my name to cheat on me. You wouldn't have planned to manipulate me into accepting your betrayal. You would have talked to me before you decided to destroy our marriage. After she left, I walked through our house in silence. 8 years of shared life surrounded me. The furniture we'd picked out together, the art we'd collected on our trips, the kitchen where we'd cook together every Sunday morning. It all felt like artifacts from someone else's life now. I poured myself a whiskey and called Michael Harrison back. Vincent, I got your message. What's the emergency? I need a divorce attorney, the best one you know. My wife has been having an affair and I have documentation of everything. Jesus, are you sure? These things can sometimes be misunderstandings. Michael, I have text messages, photos, recorded conversations, and testimony from the people she was sleeping with. She's been committing expense fraud at work to pay for her dates. She lied to everyone involved, including me. There's no misunderstanding here. There was a pause. Okay, give me an hour. I'm calling Rebecca Santos. She's the best family law attorney in Charlotte. Expensive, but worth every penny. Money's not an issue. I want this done right. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of my marriage, and started planning. Isabella thought she was playing chess, but she'd been playing checkers. She'd lied to everyone, documented everything in writing, and left a trail of evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. For the first time since I'd seen Derek's text message, I smiled. The next morning, I was in Rebecca Santos's office by 9 a.m. She was a sharp-faced woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of intense focus that made you understand immediately why she'd never lost a contested divorce case. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. I laid out the timeline, the evidence, the recordings, the financial implications. I showed her the text messages where Isabella had discussed manipulating me, the photos from Derek's phone, the audio recording where she'd outlined her plan to present me with a fait accompli. Rebecca listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Fitzgerald, in 23 years of practice, I've seen a lot of creative infidelity, but I've never seen anyone document their own deception quite this thoroughly. What's our position? Legally, you're in an excellent position. North Carolina is an at-fault divorce state, and adultery affects asset division. Your wife has essentially provided us with a complete record of premeditated adultery, fraud, and emotional manipulation." She flipped through her notes. "The expense fraud alone could result in criminal charges if her employer chooses to pursue them. The fact that she lied to multiple parties about having your consent shows a pattern of deception that goes well beyond a simple affair. What about finances? Given the fault-based nature and the documented fraud, she'll be lucky to get 15% of marital assets. No alimony, adultery bars, spousal support in North Carolina. And if she's terminated for the expense fraud, that's not your problem." I felt something loosen in my chest. How long will this take? With this level of documentation? 6 months, maybe less if she doesn't contest. The evidence is so overwhelming that most attorneys would advise their client to settle quickly and quietly. Rebecca stood up and extended her hand. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I'm going to file the papers this afternoon. By tomorrow morning, your wife will be served with divorce papers citing adultery and fraud. Are you prepared for what comes next?" "What comes next?" "She's going to panic. People like your wife, who've built elaborate justifications for their behavior, don't handle exposure well. She'll likely escalate before she accepts reality." I thought about Isabella's tears the night before, her desperate attempts to reframe her betrayal as a mistake rather than a choice. I'm prepared. I was wrong. The first sign that Rebecca had been right came at 11:47 a.m. when my phone started buzzing with calls from Isabella's number. I let them go to voicemail. Then the text messages started. "Vincent, please answer your phone. We need to talk. I know you're angry, but we can work through this. You're overreacting. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. I'm coming to your office." That last one made me call building security. By the time Isabella arrived at my workplace, there were 2 guards waiting for her in the lobby. I watched from my office window as they escorted her back to her car, her voice shrill with indignation even from 20 floors up. The voicemails were worse than the texts. In the span of 4 hours, Isabella went through what sounded like the 5 stages of grief compressed into frantic audio messages. Denial. "Vincent, there's been a misunderstanding. Let me explain what really happened." Anger. "You're destroying our marriage over nothing. It was just exploration. Married couples do this all the time." Bargaining. "I'll do anything to fix this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Please don't throw away 8 years." Depression. "I know I hurt you. I know I made a terrible mistake. Please give me a chance to make it right." Acceptance. "Fine. If you want to divorce me over this, that's your choice. But I'm not going to make it easy for you." By Friday, she'd left 47 voicemails. I saved them all. The weekend was quiet. I changed the locks on the house, legal in North Carolina during a separation, and moved Isabella's remaining belongings to the garage. I arranged for storage unit rental and had everything professionally moved by Monday morning. If she wanted her things, she could get them without stepping foot in what had been our home. Derek and Elena stopped by Sunday afternoon. I almost didn't answer the door, but curiosity got the better of me. "We brought wine," Elena said, holding up a bottle of red. "And apologies. So many apologies." They were a striking couple. Derek was tall and lean with prematurely gray hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. Elena was petite with dark hair and the kind of natural beauty that didn't need enhancement. They looked like the sort of people who belonged in an upscale lifestyle magazine, not like the predators Isabella had painted them as. "Come in," I said. "I think we all need to compare notes." We sat in my living room, Isabella's living room, really, since she'd chosen most of the furniture, and they told me their side of the story. "We've been married 12 years, Derek said. "Started exploring ethical non-monogamy about 5 years ago. Everything is built on communication and consent. Everything. We have rules," Elena added. "No lying, no cheating, no putting anyone in a position where they can't give informed consent. What Isabella did violated every principle we believe in." Derek pulled out his phone and showed me more screenshots. "After you called us Tuesday, we went through all our communications with Isabella. Look at this." The messages painted a picture of calculated deception that was even worse than I'd initially realized. Isabella hadn't just lied about having my consent. She'd created an entire fictional version of our marriage. According to Isabella's messages, I was a brilliant but repressed engineer who needed help exploring his sexuality. She was the adventurous wife trying to help her inhibited husband break out of his shell. She'd even described specific conversations we'd supposedly had about opening our marriage, complete with fake quotes from me expressing interest, but nervousness. "She told us you were too analytical to approach this spontaneously," Elena said. "That you needed to research everything thoroughly before you'd be comfortable. She made it sound like she was doing you a favor by setting things up. She painted herself as the loving wife helping her shy husband overcome his inhibitions," Derek added. "We thought we were helping a couple explore together, not enabling adultery." I poured wine and listened to them describe the Isabella they'd known. Confident, sexually adventurous, deeply in love with her husband but frustrated by his conservative approach to intimacy. It was a masterful performance, grounded in just enough truth to be believable. "The thing is," Elena said carefully, "we knew something was off. She kept making excuses for why you couldn't meet us. She said you were too nervous, too busy with work, too overwhelmed by the idea. But she was so convincing about you eventually warming up to it. And she seemed so happy," Derek said. "Like she was finally getting what she needed. We thought we were helping her marriage, not destroying it." They stayed for 2 hours, and by the time they left, I had a complete picture of Isabella's double life. She'd been actively hunting for sexual partners for months, using our marriage as bait and my supposed consent as justification. The encounters with Derek and Elena weren't the beginning of her exploration. They were just the first time she'd found willing participants who insisted on meeting the husband. Monday morning brought a call from Rebecca Santos. "Your wife has retained counsel," she said without preamble. "Maxwell Sterling." "Is that bad?" "Maxwell is aggressive and expensive. He specializes in high-conflict divorces and isn't afraid to play dirty. The fact that Isabella hired him suggests she's planning to fight this. What can he do? The evidence is overwhelming. He can try to reframe the narrative, paint you as a cold, emotionally distant husband who drove his wife to infidelity. Claim that the affair was brief and meaningless, that Isabella deserves forgiveness rather than punishment. He might even argue that your reaction is disproportionate to the offense." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. Can he win? Not with this evidence, but he can make the process more expensive and more painful for everyone involved. And Vincent? Be prepared for them to come after your character. Maxwell doesn't just defend his clients, he attacks their opponents. She was right. By Wednesday, I was receiving calls from a private investigator hired by Isabella's attorney, asking my neighbors and colleagues about my marriage, my behavior, my relationship with my wife. The questions were carefully crafted to elicit negative responses. Had I ever seemed controlling? Did I monitor Isabella's activities? Had anyone noticed signs of emotional distance or coldness? Most people refused to cooperate, but the fact that Isabella was having me investigated felt like another violation. She wasn't just defending herself. She was trying to destroy me. The counterattack came in the form of Isabella's response to the divorce filing. According to her attorney's version of events, I was an emotionally distant workaholic who had neglected my wife's needs for years. Isabella's brief affair was portrayed as a cry for help, a desperate attempt to feel desired and appreciated after being ignored and taken for granted. The document claimed that I had created an atmosphere of emotional neglect that led directly to the breakdown of the marriage, and that Isabella's infidelity was a direct result of the plaintiff's failure to maintain emotional intimacy within the marriage. It was masterfully written, I had to admit. Maxwell Sterling had taken the facts of our marriage, my demanding work schedule, Isabella's need for social interaction, the natural distance that develops in any long-term relationship, and crafted them into a narrative where I was the villain and Isabella was the victim. Rebecca was philosophical about it when we met to discuss our response. This is what Maxwell does. He takes facts and recontextualizes them. Yes, you work long hours. That makes you a neglectful husband. Yes, Isabella was social and outgoing. That makes her a woman starved for attention. Yes, you two had settled into comfortable routines. That makes you complacent and unromantic. Will it work? Not with a judge who sees the evidence. Maxwell is banking on this settling out of court, where he can negotiate based on emotion rather than facts. But if this goes to trial, no judge is going to excuse systematic fraud and deception because someone felt emotionally neglected. What's our next move? Rebecca smiled, and for the first time I understood why people said she was ruthless. We're going to let Maxwell's client hang herself. Have you checked Isabella's social media lately? I hadn't. After the separation, I'd unfriended Isabella on all platforms and blocked her number. Social media felt like torture when your marriage was imploding. She's been posting, Rebecca continued. Vague quotes about betrayal and narcissists. Memes about toxic masculinity. Articles about emotional abuse in marriages. She's building a public narrative to support her legal strategy. Is that a problem? For her? Yes. Every post is evidence of her state of mind and her strategy. She's documenting her own dishonesty in real time. Maxwell probably told her to stay off social media, but she can't help herself. Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots her investigator had captured. Isabella's Facebook feed was a carefully curated collection of posts designed to paint her as the victim of an emotionally abusive marriage. Strong women threaten weak men. Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse. Some people would rather destroy you than admit they're wrong. Each post had dozens of likes and supportive comments from people who had no idea what had actually happened. Isabella was crowdsourcing sympathy, building an army of supporters who would validate her version of events. Here's the beautiful thing, Rebecca said. Every one of these posts is admissible evidence. She's demonstrating consciousness of guilt and a pattern of deception. No innocent person conducts a social media campaign to justify their innocence. What about her job? Any word on that? Rebecca's smile got sharper. Funny you should ask. I got a call from the general counsel at her pharmaceutical company this morning. Apparently, they've completed their internal investigation into Isabella's expense reports. And 3 falsified reports totaling $4,200 in fraudulent claims? All for dinners and drinks that were actually personal entertainment, not business expenses. She's being terminated for cause, effective immediately. I felt a grim satisfaction. What does that mean for us? It means she's lost her job, her unvested stock options worth about $340,000, and any claim to unemployment benefits. It also means her earning capacity argument just evaporated. Maxwell was planning to argue that Isabella deserved spousal support while she transitioned to a new career. Now she's unemployable in pharmaceutical sales. Why unemployable? Pharma sales is a small world, Vincent. Word travels fast, and expense fraud is a career killer. Plus, Isabella made the mistake of using company resources to prospect for personal relationships. Her manager told the general counsel that clients had complained about inappropriate behavior at conferences. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. Isabella's carefully constructed life was crumbling, not because of anything I was doing, but because the natural consequences of her choices were catching up with her. Friday afternoon brought a desperate call from Isabella's sister Grace. Vincent, it's Grace Monroe. Can we talk? Grace was 5 years younger than Isabella, a nurse practitioner in Greensboro with 2 kids and a sensible husband. She'd always been the stable one in Isabella's family, the one who cleaned up messes and smoothed over conflicts. What can I do for you, Grace? It's about Isabella. She's not doing well. She's staying with us, but she's not eating. Barely sleeping. She keeps saying you won't even talk to her. I felt a familiar stab of guilt, the automatic response of someone who'd spent 8 years caring about Isabella's well-being. Then I remembered the photos, the lies, the calculated manipulation. Grace, I'm sorry Isabella is struggling, but we don't have anything to talk about. Vincent, I know she made a terrible mistake. I'm not defending what she did, but she's destroying herself with guilt. She loves you so much. She has a funny way of showing it. Grace was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Do you think there's any chance you two could work through this? Isabella says you won't even consider counseling. Grace, your sister didn't have an affair. She didn't fall in love with someone else or make an impulsive mistake. She systematically lied to multiple people for months so she could cheat on me, and then planned to manipulate me into accepting it. That's not a mistake. That's who she is. But people can change. Can they? Because right now, instead of taking responsibility for what she did, Isabella is posting on social media about what a terrible husband I was. Instead of apologizing, she's trying to destroy my reputation to justify her behavior. That doesn't sound like someone who's changed. Grace sighed. I don't know what to tell her. She's convinced you're going to take everything in the divorce. I'm going to take what I'm legally entitled to under North Carolina law. If Isabella wanted to protect her financial interests, she shouldn't have committed adultery and fraud. After Grace hung up, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the engineering textbooks and technical manuals that had always been my escape from emotional complexity. For the first time since Derek's text message, I felt something other than anger or determination. I felt sad. Not for Isabella. She'd made her choices and would live with the consequences. But for the marriage we'd had, the life we'd built, the future we'd planned. 8 years of shared mornings and inside jokes and quiet Sunday afternoons, reduced to legal documents and asset division. Isabella had thrown it all away for excitement. 2 weeks of novelty, and she'd destroyed a decade of building something real. I poured myself a scotch and opened my laptop. I had work to do. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday in November, 6 weeks after the initial discovery. I was reviewing technical specifications for a new satellite guidance system when my phone rang with a call from Derek. Vincent, you need to see something. Can you meet us for coffee? An hour later, I was sitting across from Derek and Elena at a Starbucks in South End, staring at a stack of printed emails. We got these from Isabella's attorney yesterday, Elena said. Maxwell Sterling contacted us for depositions. He wanted us to testify about your marriage, your relationship with Isabella, anything that might support her case. And? We told him to go to hell, Derek said bluntly. But not before he showed us these. The emails were between Isabella and several other people, usernames I didn't recognize, but the content was unmistakable. Isabella had been active on lifestyle forums and dating sites for months, posting about her desire to convert her vanilla husband and seeking advice on how to introduce non-monogamy into a traditional marriage. She's been planning this since at least June, Elena said. Look at the timestamps. I read through the messages, each one revealing another layer of Isabella's deception. She'd been soliciting advice on manipulation tactics, sharing details about our intimate life with strangers, and actively seeking partners for months before she'd ever approached Derek and Elena. One message particularly stood out. My husband is the type who needs to see evidence before he believes anything. I'm thinking if I can get some good photos and testimonials from satisfied partners, I can convince him that this lifestyle could work for us too. Another. He's very logical and analytical. I think if I present this as a business proposition with clear rules and boundaries, he'll be more open to it. And finally, the key is making him think it was partly his idea. Men need to feel like they're in control even when they're not. Jesus, I whispered. There's more, Derek said grimly. Show him the rest. Elena handed me another set of printouts. These were from a different forum, one dedicated to extramarital affairs. Isabella had been seeking advice on how to cheat without getting caught, how to manage the emotional complexity of multiple relationships, and how to compartmentalize her marriage and her affairs. She posted these 3 months ago, Elena said. Vincent, she was planning to cheat on you long before she ever met us. We were just convenient targets. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't about passion or excitement or even neglect. This was about power. Isabella had wanted to have her marriage and her affairs, and she'd been willing to lie to everyone involved to get what she wanted. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because Maxwell Sterling is going to try to blame us," Derek said. "He's building a case that we seduced an innocent wife and corrupted her marriage. We're not going to be scapegoats for Isabella's lies." "Also," Elena added quietly, "because you deserve to know the truth. This wasn't about you not being enough for her. This was about her wanting everything and not caring who she hurt to get it." I took copies of everything and drove straight to Rebecca's office. She was in a meeting, but her assistant squeezed me in for 10 minutes. "This changes everything," Rebecca said after reviewing the documents. Maxwell's entire strategy was built on portraying Isabella as a neglected wife who made a desperate mistake. These forum posts show premeditation going back months. What's our next move? We're going to destroy her credibility completely. Every lie she told, every manipulation she planned, every forum post where she bragged about deceiving you, it's all going into evidence. Maxwell is going to withdraw the emotional neglect claims and push for a quick settlement. "How can you be sure?" Rebecca smiled. "Because I'm going to send him copies of these documents this afternoon with a note that we're prepared to make Isabella's forum posts public record if this goes to trial. Maxwell knows that if a judge sees this level of premeditation and deception, Isabella won't just lose the divorce, she'll lose any hope of public sympathy." "What about the defamation stuff, her social media campaign?" "That's our leverage. Every post Isabella has made about emotional abuse and toxic masculinity becomes evidence of her bad faith. We can argue that she's engaged in a pattern of public defamation designed to support false legal claims." That evening, I sat in my empty house with a takeout container of Thai food and a bottle of wine, thinking about the woman I'd married. Not the woman I'd discovered, but the woman I'd thought Isabella was for 8 years. Had that woman ever existed? Or had I been married to an elaborate performance, a carefully crafted persona designed to hide someone fundamentally different underneath? I thought about our early dates, her enthusiasm for hiking and board games and quiet Sunday mornings. I thought about the way she'd cried when my father died, the pride in her voice when I'd won the defense contract, the genuine happiness she'd shown when we'd bought our house. Had any of it been real? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, assuming it was another message from Isabella trying to circumvent the block I'd placed on her number. But it wasn't Isabella. It was Maxwell Sterling. "Mr. Fitzgerald, this is Maxwell Sterling, representing Isabella Fitzgerald in your divorce proceedings. I'd like to discuss a settlement. Can we schedule a meeting?" I forwarded the message to Rebecca and poured myself more wine. Isabella's aggressive defense was crumbling faster than anyone had predicted. Within a week, we'd gone from a high-conflict divorce to settlement negotiations. The terms, when they came, were better than I'd hoped for. Isabella would receive 15% of our marital assets, the house, the investment accounts, the retirement funds we'd built together. She'd get her car and her personal belongings. I'd keep everything else, including the intellectual property from my defense work and the patents I'd filed during our marriage. No alimony, no ongoing financial obligations. Isabella would be responsible for her own legal fees. In exchange, the divorce would be finalized quickly and quietly. No public testimony about the forms, the manipulation, the elaborate deception. Isabella could tell people whatever she wanted about why our marriage ended, as long as she didn't name me specifically in any public statements. "She's getting off easy," Rebecca said when we reviewed the settlement documents. "With this level of evidence, we could have fought for even less." "I don't want her money," I said. "I want her gone." Rebecca nodded. "Smart choice. Clean breaks heal faster than complicated wounds." The divorce was finalized on January 15th, 6 months after Derek's text message had changed everything. I signed the papers in Rebecca's office, officially ending the legal relationship that had connected me to Isabella Fitzgerald for 8 years. Isabella wasn't present for the signing. According to Maxwell, she was too emotionally distraught to attend. In reality, as I learned later, she was in a psychiatric facility in Greensboro, receiving treatment for what her family called a nervous breakdown. The stress of the divorce, the job loss, the public exposure of her deception, and the collapse of her carefully constructed life had finally overwhelmed her. Grace called to tell me, her voice careful and neutral. "I thought you should know," Grace said. She's getting help, professional help. And Vincent? For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Isabella needed consequences. She'd never faced real consequences for anything in her life. After the divorce was final, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went through our house and removed every trace of Isabella. Photos, decorations, furniture she'd chosen, books she'd left behind. Everything went to charity or storage. I had the house professionally cleaned, painted the walls different colors, and bought new furniture that reflected my taste rather than hers. I was erasing the marriage, room by room, replacing it with something that was entirely mine. The transformation took 3 months. When it was finished, the house felt like home again, rather than a museum of betrayal. I could sit in my living room without remembering Isabella's lies, cook in my kitchen without hearing her voice, sleep in my bedroom without feeling her ghost in the bed beside me. Derek and Elena helped with the renovation. It might seem strange, maintaining a friendship with the people my ex-wife had used to cheat on me, but they'd become allies in the aftermath of her deception. They understood the manipulation in ways that other friends couldn't, and they'd been instrumental in exposing the truth. "You're building something new," Elena said one Saturday afternoon as we painted my home office. "That's healthy. A lot of people try to preserve what was, but you're creating what could be." "What could be?" I repeated. "I like that." Derek was installing new shelves for my engineering books. Isabella did us all a favor, in a weird way. She showed us that we needed better screening processes, better safeguards. We've completely changed how we approach new relationships now. "What do you mean?" "We insist on meeting both partners immediately. No exceptions, no delays, no excuses. And we verify consent independently through direct conversation. Isabella couldn't have deceived us under our new protocols." Elena nodded. "We've also become advocates in the lifestyle community for consent education. We speak at events now, sharing our story as a warning about the importance of verification." It was surreal, watching Derek and Elena turn their experience with Isabella into something positive. They'd been victims of her manipulation just like me, but they'd chosen to use that experience to help others avoid similar deception. I envied their ability to transform betrayal into purpose. As for me, I threw myself into work. The defense contract that had consumed so much of my time during the final months of my marriage led to 3 additional projects, each more challenging and lucrative than the last. By the summer after my divorce, I'd earned more in 6 months than Isabella and I had made together in our best year. I also started dating, something that felt both natural and terrifying after 8 years of marriage. Elena introduced me to a pediatrician named Amelia Johansson, a Swedish transplant to Charlotte who specialized in childhood development disorders. Amelia was everything Isabella wasn't. Direct where Isabella had been manipulative, honest where Isabella had been deceptive, emotionally present where Isabella had been calculating. Our first date lasted 6 hours, from lunch at a bistro in Myers Park, to coffee at a bookstore, to dinner at a wine bar downtown. "I should tell you up front," I said over our second bottle of wine. "I'm recently divorced. Very recently. Like, finalized 4 months ago recently." Amelia smiled. "Elena mentioned that. She also mentioned that your ex-wife was complicated. That's one word for it. Do you want to talk about it?" I considered the question seriously. Did I want to talk about Isabella? About the lies and the manipulation and the systematic betrayal? About the months of legal battles and the complete destruction of a life I'd spent 8 years building? "Not really," I said finally. "I'd rather talk about what comes next." "What comes next?" Amelia repeated. "I like that." We dated for 6 months before I told her the full story of Isabella and the divorce. Not because I was hiding anything, but because the past felt less important than the present we were building together. When I finally did tell her, Amelia listened without judgment or shock. "She sounds like she was very unhappy," Amelia said when I finished. "Not with you, but with herself. Happy people don't destroy their lives for excitement." "Do you think I was wrong to divorce her? To refuse counseling or forgiveness?" Amelia considered the question seriously. "I think forgiveness is for your benefit, not hers. But that doesn't mean you have to reconcile. You can forgive someone and still choose not to trust them with your future." "Have you forgiven her?" I thought about it. I'm working on it. But forgiveness doesn't mean I was wrong to protect myself. Amelia and I were married 2 years later, in a small ceremony at the Biltmore estate in Asheville. Derek and Elena attended, along with 30 other friends and family members. It was intimate and joyful and completely different from my first wedding, which had been large and traditional and designed to impress other people. Rebecca Santos performed the ceremony, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Her toast at the reception made everyone cry. Vincent and Amelia represent everything marriage should be. Two people choosing each other every day, building something together that's stronger than the sum of its parts. Isabella wasn't invited, obviously, but I heard through Grace that she'd seen the wedding announcement in the Charlotte Observer. According to Grace, Isabella had called her crying, saying she couldn't believe I'd moved on so easily. Easily, Grace repeated to me during a chance encounter at the grocery store 6 months after the wedding. As if any of this has been easy for you. How is she doing? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Grace hesitated. She's surviving. Working as a sales associate at Belk. Living with our parents again. She's dating someone, but it's not serious. Is she happy? I don't think Isabella knows how to be happy, Vincent. I think that might have been the problem all along. I thought about that conversation often in the months that followed. Grace was right. Isabella had never seemed truly happy, not in any sustainable way. She'd been excited, ambitious, energetic, but happiness had always seemed to elude her. She'd been constantly searching for something external to fill some internal void. Maybe that's why she'd been susceptible to the excitement of an affair. Maybe that's why she'd been willing to risk everything for the temporary high of deception and forbidden pleasure. Maybe she'd thought that was what happiness felt like. Amelia and I had our first child 3 years after we married, a son we named Theodore. When I held him for the first time, I thought about the family Isabella and I had planned to have, the children who would never exist because she'd chosen excitement over commitment. I felt sad for those hypothetical children, but I couldn't bring myself to regret their absence. Theodore existed because Isabella had destroyed our marriage. He was beautiful and perfect and entirely mine, in a way that any child with Isabella would never have been. 6 months after Theodore was born, I ran into Isabella at Harris Teeter. I was buying groceries for the week, Theodore strapped to my chest in a carrier, when I saw her in the produce section. She looked different. Older, smaller somehow. Her hair was shorter and streaked with gray, and she'd lost weight in a way that made her look fragile rather than attractive. She was alone, examining apples with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she had nowhere else to be. I could have avoided her, taken my cart to a different section, and completed my shopping without interaction. But something made me walk over. "Hello, Isabella." She looked up, startled, and for a moment her face transformed with what looked like hope. Then she saw Theodore sleeping against my chest, and the expression crumbled. "Vincent. Hi. How are you?" She paused, seeming to consider various responses. "I'm okay, working, living with my parents for now, but it's temporary." "That's good." She looked at Theodore, her eyes soft with something I couldn't identify. "He's beautiful. What's his name?" "Theodore." "Theodore," she repeated. "That's a strong name." We stood there for a moment. Two people who'd once shared everything, now strangers in a grocery store. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not nostalgia. Isabella was simply another person in my life story. Someone I'd known once but didn't know anymore. "I should go," I said finally. "Take care of yourself, Isabella." "Vincent?" she called as I started to walk away. "Are you happy?" I turned back to look at her. "Yes, I am." And I was. Completely, sustainably, authentically happy in a way I'd never been during our marriage. Happy with Amelia. Happy with Theodore. Happy with the life I'd built from the ruins of the life Isabella had destroyed. "Good," Isabella said quietly. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy." It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. 5 years after our divorce, I sold my consulting company to Honeywell for $12 million. The patents I'd developed during our marriage, the intellectual property Isabella had tried to claim in the divorce settlement, had become the foundation of a revolutionary satellite guidance system. The irony wasn't lost on me. The work Isabella had resented, the long hours she'd complained about, the technical obsessions she'd mocked, they'd made me rich. The sale made the business pages of several North Carolina newspapers, including a feature story in the Charlotte Observer about successful local entrepreneurs. The reporter asked about my background, my education, my path to success. I got divorced 5 years ago, I told him. It was the best thing that ever happened to me professionally. Sometimes destruction creates opportunities for growth. The reporter, a young man who clearly didn't understand the weight of that statement, wrote it up as a throwaway quote about resilience. But I meant every word. Amelia and I used part of the money to buy a larger house in Myers Park, not far from where Isabella and I had lived. We bought it not to prove anything to anyone, but because we needed more space for our growing family. Theodore had a baby sister, Sophie, who was walking and getting into everything. The rest of the money went into investments and trusts for the children's education. I also endowed a scholarship at UNC Charlotte for engineering students from single-parent households, something I did quietly and anonymously. I thought about calling Isabella when the sale was announced, telling her about the money that had come from the work she'd denigrated. But what would be the point? She was living her own life now, dealing with her own consequences. My success wasn't about her anymore. Derek and Elena had become genuine friends over the years, the kind of people who came to barbecues and birthday parties and family holidays. They'd been through their own evolution, becoming advocates for ethical non-monogamy and consent education in the lifestyle community. Isabella did us all a favor in the weirdest way, Elena said one evening as we watched our children play in the backyard. They had twin daughters who were Theodore's age, bright and curious kids who called me Uncle Vincent. How so? She taught us what not to look for in people. She taught us to verify trust instead of just accepting it. She made us better at reading people and protecting ourselves. Derek nodded. We've helped 3 other couples avoid similar situations since then. People who were being manipulated or deceived by partners claiming to have consent they didn't actually have. You turned your trauma into purpose, I said. Just like you did, Elena replied. Your success, your marriage to Amelia, this beautiful family, none of it would exist if Isabella hadn't blown up your life. She was right, though I'd never thought about it quite that way. Isabella's betrayal had been the catalyst for everything good that came after. Not because I was grateful for the betrayal itself, but because I'd chosen to build something better from the wreckage. Last month, Grace called to tell me that Isabella was engaged. Her fiancé was a mechanic from Greensboro, a divorced father of 2 who didn't know about her past. She's telling people she was widowed, Grace said, that her first husband died in an accident. Does her fiancé know the truth? I don't think so. And Vincent? I don't think I'm going to tell him. It's not my responsibility to protect him from her lies. I understood Grace's position, but I felt bad for the mechanic. He was walking into a relationship built on deception, just like Derek and Elena had. The difference was that Derek and Elena had demanded verification and caught the lies. This man had no reason to suspect he was being manipulated. Do you think she's changed? I asked. Grace was quiet for a long moment. I think Isabella has convinced herself that she's a different person now. Whether that's the same thing as actually changing, I don't know. After we hung up, I sat in my home office, the same room where I'd received Derek's text message 6 years earlier, and thought about patterns. People who lie about big things usually lie about small things too. People who manipulate their way into relationships usually manipulate their way through them. Isabella might genuinely believe she'd changed, but belief and reality weren't the same thing. The mechanic from Greensboro was probably in for an education about the woman he thought he was marrying. I felt bad for him, but I felt worse for his children. They would be the real victims if Isabella reverted to her old patterns. Kids always were. Amelia found me there an hour later, staring out the window at our backyard where Theodore and Sophie were playing on the swing set I'd built last summer. Penny, for your thoughts? I told her about Grace's call, about Isabella's engagement and the lies she was telling her fiancé. Do you think we should warn him? Amelia asked. How? Call a stranger and tell him his fiancé? He is a pathological liar based on my experience from 6 years ago? He'd think I was a bitter ex-husband trying to sabotage her happiness. You could send the court records anonymously. The divorce decree is public information. I considered it. The divorce decree would show that Isabella had been found guilty of adultery, but it wouldn't explain the manipulation, the fraud, the systematic deception. Without context, it might look like a standard messy divorce. No, I said finally. Isabella's life isn't my responsibility anymore. If this man chooses to marry someone without doing basic due diligence, that's his choice. Even knowing what you know about her? Especially knowing what I know about her. I spent 8 years trying to fix Isabella's problems, trying to make her happy, trying to be enough for her. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life trying to protect people from her. Amelia nodded. You're right. You can't save people from their own poor decisions. Besides, I added, maybe she has changed. Maybe the consequences of what she did to me taught her something. Maybe this time will be different. I didn't believe it, but I wanted to. Not for Isabella's sake, but for the mechanic and his children. Everyone deserved a chance at genuine happiness, even if they were too naive to protect themselves from people who might take advantage of that desire. That evening, as I was putting Theodore to bed, he asked me a question that stopped me cold. Daddy, Mommy said you had another wife before her. Where did she go? Theodore was 5, old enough to understand family structures, but young enough that complex explanations were beyond his comprehension. Amelia and I had agreed to be honest with the children about our past, but age-appropriate in our explanations. My first wife and I couldn't make our marriage work, I said carefully. So we got divorced, which means we stopped being married. Then I met Mommy, and we got married instead. Why couldn't you make it work? Sometimes people change and become different from who they were when they got married. Sometimes they want different things or treat each other badly. When that happens, it's better for everyone if they stop being married. Theodore considered this with the seriousness that 5-year-olds brought to big concepts. Did you stop loving her? I stopped trusting her, I said. And you can't love someone you don't trust. Do you trust Mommy? Completely. And you love her? Very much. Good, Theodore said decisively, because I like our family the way it is. Me too, buddy, me too. After he fell asleep, I found Amelia in our bedroom, reading a medical journal and making notes for a research paper she was writing. Theodore asked about Isabella tonight, I said. What did you tell him? I repeated our conversation, and Amelia smiled. You handled that perfectly. Age-appropriate honesty without unnecessary details. Do you think we should tell them more when they're older? About what really happened? Amelia set down her journal and gave me her full attention. I think we should tell them as much as they need to know to make good decisions about relationships. The importance of trust, the danger of deception, the value of integrity in partnership. The specific details of your first marriage aren't as important as the lessons those experiences taught you. What lessons did they teach me? That you can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. That love without trust is just attachment. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. That you deserve to be with someone who chooses you every day, not someone who treats you like a safety net while they pursue excitement elsewhere. She was right. Those were the lessons Isabella had taught me, the hard-won wisdom that had made me a better partner for Amelia and a better father to our children. Also, Amelia added with a smile, that you're much stronger than you thought you were. Not many people could have handled that situation with as much grace and strategic thinking as you did. Grace? You could have destroyed Isabella completely. You had the evidence and the legal position to take everything and leave her with nothing. You could have made her affair and her deception public, ruined her reputation permanently. But you took what you were entitled to and let her rebuild her life. That's grace. I'd never thought about it that way. At the time, I'd felt like I was just protecting myself and minimizing the damage Isabella could do to my future. But maybe Amelia was right. Maybe there had been grace in my restraint. Do you ever regret it? Amelia asked. Not fighting harder, not making her pay more for what she did? No, I said immediately. Revenge would have tied me to her forever. This way, I got to move on completely. And now she's someone else's problem. Now she's her own problem. Whether she's learned from what happened or is repeating the same patterns with someone new, that's not my concern. Amelia nodded and returned to her journal. I lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the strange path that had led me to this moment. If Isabella hadn't sent that text to Derek, if she hadn't been discovered, if she hadn't blown up our marriage, none of this would exist. Theodore and Sophie wouldn't exist. My marriage to Amelia wouldn't exist. The financial success that had come from my patents wouldn't exist. The deep, sustainable happiness I'd found wouldn't exist. Isabella had given me everything by taking everything away. I thought about calling her, just once, to thank her for the life I'd built from the ruins of the life she'd destroyed. But that would be cruel, and I wasn't a cruel person. Isabella would have to live with her choices just like I got to live with mine. Instead, I reached over and took Amelia's hand. She squeezed my fingers without looking up from her reading, the kind of casual intimacy that came from complete trust and genuine partnership. This was what love looked like when it was built on truth instead of deception, on choice instead of manipulation, on genuine compatibility instead of strategic performance. This was what I'd been searching for in my first marriage without realizing it. Isabella had been right about one thing. I was analytical. I did need evidence before I believed something. I did approach relationships with the same systematic thinking I brought to engineering problems. But she'd been wrong about that being a weakness. It was my strength. It's why I'd documented her betrayal so thoroughly. It's why I'd built an airtight legal case. It's why I'd been able to make strategic decisions instead of emotional ones during the divorce. And it's why my second marriage was built on a foundation solid enough to last a lifetime. As I drifted off to sleep next to my wife, surrounded by the sounds of our children breathing in nearby rooms, I realized that I hadn't thought about Isabella in months. She'd become irrelevant to my life, a character from a story that belonged to someone else. That realization filled me with something deeper than happiness. It filled me with peace. 6 years ago, Isabella's betrayal had felt like the end of the world. Tonight, it felt like ancient history, important only for the lessons it had taught me about what I wouldn't accept in a relationship and what I deserved from a partner. Derek had been wrong when he'd sent that first text message. Isabella and I hadn't been exploring a new lifestyle together. She'd been exploring it alone, using my name and my marriage as cover for her deception. But in the end, her lies had set me free to find something real. Her betrayal had led me to Amelia. Her manipulation had taught me to value honesty above all else. Isabella thought she'd been playing chess, moving pieces strategically to get what she wanted without consequences. But she'd actually been playing with fire, and she'd burned down everything she'd claimed to value. I'd built something better from the ashes. The last I heard of Isabella was 3 years ago, when Grace mentioned that her engagement to the mechanic had ended. Apparently, he'd discovered her pattern of lies and manipulation 6 months before their wedding, and called everything off. "She's back to living with our parents," Grace had said. "She keeps saying she doesn't understand why relationships never work out for her." I wasn't surprised. People who approach relationships as strategic games rather than authentic connections rarely find lasting happiness. They're too busy manipulating outcomes to build genuine intimacy. Isabella would probably continue cycling through relationships, each one failing when her partners discovered the gap between who she presented herself to be and who she actually was. She might never understand that sustainable love required honesty, that lasting partnerships were built on truth rather than performance. Or maybe she would learn. Maybe someday she'd meet someone who demanded authenticity from her, someone who wouldn't accept her carefully crafted persona as a substitute for genuine vulnerability. Maybe she'd be forced to confront her patterns and choose change over comfort. I hoped so, for her sake. Everyone deserved the chance to find real love, even people who'd made terrible choices in pursuit of false excitement. But her journey toward authenticity, if it ever happened, would unfold without me. I'd given Isabella 8 years of my life and the best of my 20s and early 30s. I'd given her my trust, my loyalty, my plans for the future, and my dreams of building something lasting together. She'd thrown it all away for 2 weeks of novelty. Now I was 45, married to an extraordinary woman who chose me every day, father to 2 beautiful children who would grow up understanding the importance of integrity in relationships. My company had been sold for more money than I'd ever imagined having, my patents were being used in satellites orbiting the Earth, and my work was contributing to advances in aerospace technology that would benefit humanity for generations. Isabella's betrayal had led me to everything I'd never known I wanted. As I watched Theodore and Sophie play in our backyard, building elaborate structures with blocks and negotiating complex rules for their imaginary games, I realized they were learning skills Isabella had never mastered. Cooperation, honest communication, the ability to resolve conflicts without deception. They would grow up in a household where truth was valued over convenience, where problems were solved through conversation rather than manipulation, where love was expressed through consistent choice rather than grand gestures designed to obscure bad behavior. They would never wonder if their parents' marriage was real or performance. They would never question whether the life they were building together was built on lies. They would grow up with a template for authentic love that would serve them well in their own relationships. That might be Isabella's greatest gift to me. She'd shown me exactly what I didn't want, so clearly that I could recognize and create its opposite. I thought about Derek's text message sometimes, the innocent communication that had blown up my world and revealed the truth about my marriage. Such a small thing, a mistaken assumption, a friendly invitation to dinner, a photo shared among people who thought they were friends. But small actions have large consequences when they intersect with elaborate lies. Isabella's deception had been a house of cards, and Derek's text had been the gentle breeze that brought it all down. If he hadn't sent that message, I might never have discovered the truth. Isabella might have succeeded in manipulating me into accepting her affairs, might have convinced me that opening our marriage was my idea, might have gotten away with her systematic betrayal. The thought made me shudder. An entire lifetime lived in a false reality, never knowing that the woman I loved was using me as cover for a double life. But Derek had sent the message, and the truth had surfaced, and I'd been forced to confront the reality of who I'd married. The pain had been enormous but temporary. The freedom that followed had been permanent. Last month, I got a call from Rebecca Santos. She was retiring from family law practice and wanted to update me on some legal changes that might affect my settlement with Isabella. North Carolina has updated its alimony statutes, she said, but it won't affect you since Isabella wasn't awarded any alimony anyway. Good to know. How are you enjoying retirement? Loving it. Traveling with my husband, spending time with grandchildren. But Vincent, I have to tell you, your case was one of the most satisfying of my career. Why? Because it was so clean. Usually these high-conflict divorces are messy on both sides. Both parties make mistakes, both have things to hide, both contribute to the breakdown. Your case was different. You did everything right, and Isabella did everything wrong. It made my job easy. I got lucky with the evidence. You got lucky that your wife was stupid enough to document her own deception. But you were smart enough to preserve that evidence and use it strategically. A lot of people in your situation would have confronted her immediately, given her time to destroy evidence or craft a better story. You played it perfectly. After we hung up, I thought about Rebecca's assessment. Had I played it perfectly? At the time, it had felt like I was barely keeping my head above water, making decisions in crisis mode and hoping they turned out to be right. But maybe that was what grace under pressure looked like. Maybe strength wasn't the absence of fear or uncertainty, but the ability to make good decisions despite both. Isabella had tested every assumption I'd ever made about marriage, loyalty, and trust. She'd forced me to question everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd committed my life to. She'd shown me that love without trust was just habit, that marriage without honesty was just a legal contract. But she'd also shown me what I was capable of when pushed to my limits. I could gather evidence while smiling at breakfast. I could make strategic decisions while my world was collapsing. I could protect myself without destroying someone else unnecessarily. I could survive betrayal and build something better from the wreckage. Those were skills I'd never wanted to develop, lessons I'd never wanted to learn. But having them made me a better husband to Amelia, a better father to Theodore and Sophie, a better friend to people like Derek and Elena, who valued authenticity over performance. Isabella had tried to play games with my life, but she'd ended up teaching me how to recognize and reject game playing in all its forms. She'd made me immune to manipulation by showing me exactly what it looked like. Today, Theodore is 8 and Sophie is 5. They're smart, confident kids who ask direct questions and expect honest answers. They resolve conflicts through conversation, apologize when they make mistakes, and understand that actions have consequences. They've never known a household where truth was optional or where love was conditional on performance. They've never seen adults lie to each other or manipulate each other or use children as weapons in relationship conflicts. They think all marriages look like their parents' marriage. Two people who choose each other every day, who solve problems together, who argue occasionally but always resolve their conflicts with respect and honesty. They're going to be shocked when they discover that some people approach relationships as strategic games rather than authentic partnerships. They're going to be baffled by people who lie about important things or manipulate their partners or use children to gain advantage in adult conflicts. That innocence will protect them, I think. They'll be less susceptible to manipulation because they won't expect it. They'll demand authenticity in relationships because that's what they've seen modeled. They'll walk away from people who treat love as a transaction because they'll recognize that real love doesn't require payment. Isabella's betrayal will protect my children from people like Isabella. That might be the most valuable inheritance I could give them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Isabella had chosen differently. If she'd talked to me about her desire for sexual exploration instead of pursuing it secretly. If she'd been honest about feeling neglected or bored instead of seeking excitement through deception. Could we have worked through it? Could our marriage have survived if she'd approached her dissatisfaction with honesty instead of betrayal? I'll never know, because Isabella never gave us that chance. She chose lies over conversation, manipulation over vulnerability, betrayal over trust. She decided that getting what she wanted was more important than preserving what we'd built together. But I suspect the answer is no. Someone who could plan and execute that level of deception, who could lie to multiple people for months, who could systematically manipulate the person who loved her most. That's not someone dealing with temporary dissatisfaction. That's someone with fundamental character flaws that don't get fixed with counseling. Isabella didn't betray me because she was unhappy. She betrayed me because betrayal was easier than honesty, because manipulation was more comfortable than vulnerability, because she wanted to have everything without giving up anything. People like that don't change through conversation. They change through consequences, if they change at all. The consequences Isabella faced, losing her marriage, her job, her financial security, her social standing, her future with the mechanic, were entirely the result of her own choices. I didn't create them, or impose them, or seek revenge. I simply refused to shield her from the natural results of her deception. That might be the most important lesson of all. You can't love someone into integrity. You can't sacrifice your way into their honesty. You can't fix character flaws with patience and understanding. All you can do is decide what you will and won't accept, then follow through on those decisions regardless of how much it hurts. I accepted 8 years of building a life with Isabella. I didn't accept a lifetime of being manipulated and deceived. I chose my future over my past, my integrity over my comfort, my truth over her lies. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made and the best decision I'd ever made. Tonight, as I write this, Amelia is reading to Sophie in her bedroom while Theodore builds a robot with an electronics kit I bought him for his birthday. In a few minutes, I'll help with bedtime routines. Then Amelia and I will sit on our back porch with a glass of wine and talk about our days. We'll discuss Theodore's progress in school, Sophie's new friendship with a neighbor girl, the research project Amelia is working on, the consulting contract I'm considering. We'll make plans for the weekend, review our budget, decide whether to book a vacation for spring break. Ordinary conversations about an ordinary life, but grounded in complete trust and authentic love. No hidden agendas, no secret communications, no elaborate deceptions. Just two people building something real together, one conversation at a time. Isabella probably thinks she lost everything when our marriage ended. In reality, she never had anything real to lose. Our marriage was built on her performance, sustained by her lies, and destined to collapse the moment truth surfaced. What she lost was the illusion of stability she'd created through deception. What I lost was the illusion of knowing someone I'd never actually known. What I found was the possibility of something real. 6 months ago, I ran into Derek at a conference in Atlanta. We had coffee and caught up on our families, our work, our lives. He mentioned, almost casually, that Isabella had reached out to him on social media. She wanted to apologize, he said, for involving us in her deception, for using us to hurt you. She asked if we'd ever told you about other people she approached at the gym. What did you tell her? I told her it was 6 years too late for apologies and that we had no interest in reopening that chapter of our lives. Elena blocked her immediately. Do you think she was sincere? Derek considered the question seriously. I think she's lonely and looking for absolution. But sincerity? I don't know if Isabella knows how to be sincere. Everything she said in that message could have been calculated to make her feel better about herself. He was probably right. People who manipulate others often manipulate themselves too, crafting narratives that cast them as misunderstood rather than dishonest, as victims of circumstance rather than architects of their own destruction. Isabella probably tells herself that she was trapped in an unsatisfying marriage, that she deserved excitement and passion, that her deception was understandable given her circumstances. She probably believes that I overreacted, that her betrayal wasn't that serious, that losing everything was disproportionate to her crimes. The alternative, accepting full responsibility for destroying a good marriage through systematic deception, would require the kind of honest self-reflection that Isabella had never demonstrated the capacity for. Do you ever feel bad for her? Derek asked. Sometimes, I admitted. Not because she didn't deserve consequences, but because she chose consequences over happiness. She had everything she claimed to want: marriage, financial security, a partner who loved her, and she threw it away for temporary excitement. Some people are addicted to chaos, Derek said. They're not comfortable with stability, so they create drama to feel alive. Maybe Isabella was one of those people. Maybe she was. Maybe that's why our quiet Sunday mornings had felt suffocating to her. Why our comfortable routines had felt like prison. Why she'd needed the adrenaline rush of deception to feel excited about her life. If so, then our marriage was doomed from the beginning. Not because I was inadequate or inattentive, but because I offered stability and she craved instability, because I valued honesty and she found excitement in lies, because I wanted to build something lasting and she wanted to experience something temporary. We'd been incompatible in ways neither of us had understood. The difference was that I'd tried to make it work within the boundaries of marriage, while she'd tried to have both marriage and its alternatives simultaneously. That night, I told Amelia about my conversation with Derek and Isabella's attempted apology. How does that make you feel? She asked. Sad for her, I guess. Not because she contacted Derek, but because 6 years later she's still looking backward instead of forward. She's still trying to manage the narrative of what happened instead of learning from it. Do you think she has learned from it? If she had, she wouldn't be reaching out to people from that time period. She'd be focused on building something new instead of trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. Amelia nodded. It's like she's stuck in that moment, unable to move forward because she can't accept what happened. I moved forward by accepting what happened and choosing to build something different. She's trying to move forward by rewriting what happened so it doesn't reflect badly on her. Those are two very different approaches to healing. Only one of them actually works. Last week, Theodore asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. He'd been working on a school project about family history and needed to interview relatives about important events in their lives. Dad, what's the most important thing that ever happened to you? I thought about the obvious answers: graduating from college, getting my first engineering job, meeting his mother, the births of my children, selling my company. All true, all significant milestones in my life. But the most important thing? The event that changed everything else? Getting divorced from my first wife, I said finally. Theodore looked confused. But that was a bad thing, right? Getting divorced means someone was sad. It was painful when it happened, I agreed. But it was also necessary. Sometimes bad things lead to good things, and sometimes ending something that isn't working is the best thing you can do. How did bad lead to good? Well, if I hadn't gotten divorced, I never would have met your mom. Which means you and Sophie never would have been born. And I never would have learned how to recognize real love versus fake love. Theodore considered this with the seriousness that 8-year-olds bring to complex concepts. So your first wife being mean to you was actually good? Her being mean to me was bad. But me learning about it and deciding not to accept it was good. The bad thing taught me what to look for in a good person. Is Mommy a good person? Mommy is an excellent person. She's honest and kind, and she chooses our family every day. She's the opposite of what was wrong with my first wife. Will you ever get divorced from Mommy? No, buddy. Mommy and I are real partners. We tell each other the truth, we solve problems together, and we keep our promises to each other. Those are the things that make marriages last. What if you get angry at each other? We do get angry sometimes, but we talk about why we're angry, and we work together to fix whatever's wrong. We don't lie to each other or hurt each other on purpose. That's good, Theodore said decisively. I like when people keep their promises. Me too. That's why I only make promises I can keep, and why I only trust people who keep their promises to me. After Theodore went to bed, I thought about that conversation. How do you explain to a child that his existence was contingent on his father being betrayed by someone who'd promised to love him forever? How do you help them understand that sometimes the worst things that happen to you create space for the best things to happen? Isabella's betrayal had been devastating when it occurred, but it had also been revelatory, educational, and ultimately liberating. It had forced me to confront the difference between love and attachment, between commitment and codependence, between accepting someone's flaws and enabling their destructive behavior. Without that education, I might never have recognized Amelia's authenticity as the precious gift it was. I might have taken her honesty for granted, might not have appreciated her consistency, might not have understood how rare it was to find someone who meant what they said and said what they meant. Isabella had shown me what I wouldn't accept. Amelia had shown me what I'd been looking for without knowing it. Both experiences had been necessary. Both had shaped who I was as a husband and father. Both had contributed to the life I was living now. The difference was that Isabella's contribution had been inadvertent. She'd destroyed something to teach me what I valued. Amelia's contribution was intentional. She built something to show me what was possible. As I write this, it's been 8 years since Derek's text message changed everything. Theodore is about to start 3rd grade, Sophie is in kindergarten, and Amelia is pregnant with our 3rd child. We're buying a bigger house in the same neighborhood, one with enough bedrooms for our growing family, and a workshop where I can tinker with electronics and teach Theodore about engineering. The life Isabella destroyed has been replaced by something I never could have imagined when I was married to her. Not just different, but better in every measurable way. More honest, more stable, more joyful, more authentic. Sometimes I wonder if Isabella ever thinks about the life she gave up, the family that could have existed if she'd chosen honesty over deception. Does she regret her choices? Does she understand what she lost? Does she take responsibility for the destruction she caused? I'll never know, because Isabella's internal life is no longer my concern. She made her choices, I made mine, and we're living with the consequences of both. Her consequences: financial instability, employment difficulties, relationship failures, social isolation, and the knowledge that she destroyed something good for something temporary. My consequences: a marriage built on trust, children who understand the value of integrity, financial success that came from work she'd dismissed as unimportant, and the deep satisfaction of building something real from the ashes of something false. If someone had told me 8 years ago that Isabella's betrayal would lead to the best decade of my life, I wouldn't have believed them. The pain was too fresh, the destruction too complete, the betrayal too systematic. But they would have been right. Isabella thought she was taking something from me when she lied about our marriage to justify her affairs. She thought she was getting away with something when she manipulated Derek and Elena into participating in her deception. She thought she was managing the situation when she planned to present me with a fait accompli and manipulate me into accepting her betrayal. She was wrong about all of it. What she actually did was free me from a marriage that was built on her performance rather than her authenticity. She showed me what I wouldn't tolerate in a relationship and taught me to recognize manipulation in all its forms. She forced me to become the kind of man who could attract and deserve someone like Amelia. She gave me everything by taking everything away. Tonight, as I close this story, Amelia is asleep beside me, one hand resting on her growing belly where our 3rd child is developing. Down the hall, Theodore and Sophie are sleeping in rooms filled with books and toys and art projects, surrounded by evidence of a childhood built on love and honesty. This is what survived Isabella's attempt to destroy my life. Something better than what she'd tried to destroy. This is what I built from the ruins of my first marriage, a second marriage that proved the first one had never been real. This is what I learned from 8 years of systematic deception. Truth is the only foundation that can support lasting love. Isabella taught me that lesson against her will, by showing me what happens when truth is replaced by performance, when authenticity is sacrificed for excitement, when promises become convenient lies. She thought she was playing chess with my life. She didn't realize she was teaching me the rules of the game. I won by refusing to play. The end.